Okay, we are on page 25. Scout just got in trouble from Calpurnia for making fun of Walter Cunningham, the kid who was eating with them for dinner. She was making fun of him because he was eating really messy, and they're a lot more poor than Scout and her family is. And Calpurnia, their maid, yelled at her and made her eat in the kitchen. Jem and Walter returned to school ahead of me, staying behind to advise Atticus of Calpurnia's inadequacies was worth a solitary sprint past the Radley place. She likes Jem better than she likes me anyway, I concluded, and suggested that Atticus lose no time in packing her off. Have you ever considered that Jem doesn't worry her half as much? Atticus's voice was flinty. I've no intention of getting rid of her, now or ever. We couldn't operate a single day without Cal. Have you ever thought of that? You think about how much Cal does for you and you mind her, you hear? I returned to school and hated Calpurnia steadily until a sudden shriek shattered my resentments. I looked up to see Miss Caroline standing in the middle of the room, sheer horror flooding her face. Apparently, she had revived enough to persevere in her profession. It's alive! She screamed. The male population of the class rushed as one to her assistance. Lord, I thought, she's scared of a mouse. Little Chuck Little, whose patience with all living things was phenomenal, said, Which way did he go, Miss Caroline? Tell us where he went, quick. DC, he turned to the boy behind him. DC, shut the door and we'll catch him. Quick, ma'am, where did he go? Miss Caroline pointed a shaking finger not at the floor nor at a desk, but to a hulking individual unknown to me. Little Chuck's face contracted and he said gently, You mean him, ma'am? Yes'm, he's alive. Did he scare you some way? Miss Caroline said desperately, I was just walking by when it crawled out of his hair. Just crawled out of his hair. Little Chuck grinned broadly. There ain't no need to fear a cootie, ma'am. Ain't you ever seen one? Now, don't you be afraid. You just go back to your desk and teach us some more. Little Chuck Little was another member of the population who didn't know where his next meal was coming from, but he was born a gentleman. He put his hand under her elbow and led Miss Caroline to the front of the room. Now, don't you fret, ma'am, he said. There ain't no need to fear a cootie. I'll just fetch you some cool water. The cootie's host showed not the faintest interest in the furor he had wrought. He searched his scalp above his forehead, located his guest, and pinched it between his thumb and forefinger. Miss Caroline watched the process in horrid fascination. Little Chuck brought water in a paper cup and she drank it gratefully. Finally, she found her voice. What is your name, son? She asked softly. The boy blinked. Who, me? Miss Caroline nodded. Burris Ewell. Miss Caroline inspected her roll book. I have a Ewell here, but I don't have a first name. Would you spell your first name for me? Don't know how. They call me Burris at home. Well, Burris, I think we better excuse you for the rest of the afternoon. I want you to go home and wash your hair. From her desk, she produced a thick volume, leafed through the pages, and read it for a moment. A good home remedy for... Burris, I want you to go home and wash your hair with lye soap. When you've done that, treat your scalp with kerosene. What for, missus? To get rid of the, cooties. You see, Burris, the other children might catch them, and you wouldn't want that, would you? The boy stood up. He was the filthiest human I had ever seen. His neck was dark gray. The backs of his hands were rusty, and his fingernails were black, deep into the quick. He peered at Miss Caroline from a fist-sized clean spot on his face. No one had noticed him, probably, because Miss Caroline and I had entertained the class most of the morning. And Burris, said Miss Caroline, please bathe yourself before you come back tomorrow. The boy laughed rudely. You ain't sending me home, missus. I was on the verge of leaving. I'd done my time for this year. Miss Caroline looked puzzled. What do you mean by that? The boy did not answer. He gave a short, contemptuous snort. One of the elderly members of the class answered her. He's one of the Ewells, ma'am. And I wondered if this explanation would be as unsuccessful as my attempt. But Miss Caroline seemed willing to listen. Whole school's full of them. They come the first day every year and then leave. The truant lady gets him here because she threatens him with the sheriff, but she's given up trying to hold him. She reckons she's carried out the law just getting their names on the roll and running them here the first day. You're supposed to mark them absent the rest of the year. But what about their parents? Miss Caroline said in genuine concern. Ain't got no mother, was the answer, and their pa's right contentious. Burris Ewell was flattered by the recital. Been coming to school the first day of the first grade for 3 years now, he said expansively. Reckon if I'm smart this year, they'll promote me to second. Miss Caroline said, Sit back down, please, Burris. And the moment she said it, I knew she had made a serious mistake. The boy's condensation flashed to anger. You try and make me, Mrs.